Hi guys, I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet because I know you have your vocab to study for. Okay, 6B vocab quiz is tomorrow, Friday the 15th. So when we were last talking in class, we were talking about problems with pesticides, and we're going to continue with that now. And this is nothing new for you guys. You guys have seen bioaccumulation, biological magnification over and over again. And pesticides are one of the main things that bioaccumulate and biomagnify in the environment as well as within organisms' bodies. DDT is the big endocrine disruptor, and it actually makes the eggs of larger birds of prey or smaller birds brittle. The birds go to lay on them to incubate them, and then they crack. You don't have the younger generation of birds being born, so essentially you get a die out of large bird of prey species, especially higher up on the food chain where that DDT is biologically magnified. Then another thing is mobility in the environment. They don't stay where they're applied. They move through the soil, the water, and the air. Okay, the more porous your soil is, the more contaminated your water can become. You saw the air pollution article in China with nitrogen pollution. It was going into the air, it was raining down, and it was getting into waterways through runoff, soaking down into the soils. None of those are good things. Then we have the risks to human health. So some short-term effects: nausea, vomiting, headaches. Sometimes you can get damage to the nervous systems if it's a large enough acute dose. However, you have lots and lots of long-term effects. And the scary thing is we don't know all of the long-term effects yet because these things haven't been studied. So many different types of cancers, sterility, especially from different types of DDT or different types of endocrine disruptors, DDT being one of them, miscarriages, birth defects, decrease of the body's ability to fight infections, and now they're making a connection to Parkinson's disease with chemicals and pesticides. So here are the amazing bees. We depend on insects, bees, ants, flies, all different sorts of insects to pollinate crops. So 800 cultivated plant species rely on insect pollinators. If you don't have those pollinators pollinating these crops, then you don't have these crops. Okay. Also hummingbirds, bats. Okay. And honeybees pollinate more than 100 crops, a third of the U.S.'s diet. And the native populations of honeybees have plummeted in the past about 15 years. So what's going on now is that these farmers don't have bees to actually, wild bees, to pollinate their crops. So they're renting bees. So you can bring a colony of bees in to your farm to pollinate at the time you need your crops pollinated, which is crazy. To conserve bees, reduce or eliminate pesticide use and plant flowering plants to actually entice your bees to come in. So the big disease here is CCD, and it's not a disease, it's a disorder, and it's colony collapse disorder. And it's this phenomenon that occurs when the majority of the worker bees in this colony of bees disappear. Huge economic loss, shortages of bees up 20%, and then in the 6 years leading up to 2013, more than 10 million beehives were lost to colony collapse disorder, which is nearly twice the normal rate of loss, which is crazy. Okay, there's been a huge amount of speculation about neonicotinoids causing colony collapse disorder, but there are other suggested causes: infections, malnutrition, pathogens, genetic factors, immunodeficiencies, loss of habitat, and this could also be synergistic reactions between pesticides. So you have one pesticide of strength 2, another pesticide of strength 2 as well, but when you put them together, their combined strength is 6. So maybe it's using different pesticides together, or it could be a variety of factors together that are causing this colony collapse disorder. There are several alternatives to pesticides. You have pheromones and hormones to lure pests into traps. Reproductive controls are sterilizing some of the members. So there's a certain way that they can sterilize the male members of a population in the crops. Okay, it's done with a certain light or light ray. You have genetic controls. So genetically modified plants, GMOs. Okay, we're going to look at the Bt toxin in corn. Most of our corn has this Bt toxin laced into it, and what happens is the bugs try to eat the corn, and they get that Bt toxin, and they die. Okay? Potential problem is it may affect the non-target species, like monarch butterflies, whose populations have plummeted by 90% in the past couple years. Then you can have quarantine. Okay? Instead of bringing in invasive species that become pests in our crops, you have restrictions on the importation of exotic plants, and this is effective, but it's not foolproof. Another thing is irradiating food. So when you harvest this food, you expose it to ionizing radiation. It kills a lot of microorganisms, and already this is used in lots of meats. It's controversial due to potential for free radicals, but we really don't know a lot about this. We really don't know a lot about anything. More alternative to pesticides are using cultivation methods to control your pests. So you can interplant your plants, alternating rows, and proper timing of planting, fertilizing, and irrigating can actually decrease your pest population, and you can rotate your crops. Another thing is biological control. Use a naturally occurring disease organism, a parasite, or a predator, but you have to make sure that you're not introducing a species that isn't native that attacks unintended hosts. For me, I get ladybugs every year, and I put them in my garden, and they eat all the nasty aphids off of a lot of my plants. Okay. So like I said, these biological control agents, if they're non-native, they can become pests themselves. So you really don't know what's going to happen when you introduce a species in. You can have the greatest intentions with really bad consequences. So biocontrol must be carefully planned and carefully regulated. So to put this all together, we have integrated pest management. So this is a combination of different pest control methods. So conventional pesticides are used sparingly and only when all other method fails. So you have biocontrol, population monitoring, habitat alteration, you have your crop rotation, you use GMO crops, you can use alternative tillage methods like no-till agriculture to prevent your weeds from coming up, and then lastly, you use your chemicals when necessary. So if you look at this graph, within 4 years of using integrated pest management in Indonesia, rather than just spray, the rice yields rose 30%, and $179 million was saved by phasing out subsidies on farming because these farmers were using so much pesticides. So we have a couple laws controlling pesticide use. FIRFA, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, basically says we're going to regulate pesticides. And if you're a chemical manufacturer and you screw up with this, you are going to have to deal with it. Okay? The FDA or the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act gives authority to FDA to oversee the safety of food, drugs, and cosmetics. So within that is the Delaney Clause, which in 1958 was an amendment to this Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that addressed concerns about the safety of new food additives. So this is your common sense that says if a substance is found to cause cancer in a man or an animal, it cannot be used as a food additive. Okay, basically common sense there. And last but not least, we have the manufacture and use of banned pesticides. So some U.S. companies still make banned or seriously restricted pesticides. China, India, and Mexico still manufacture DDT, which means that we still probably do eat food that has DDT on it, which nobody should be thrilled about. And the next thing is the global ban of persistent organic pollutants, which we've talked about before in Stockholm Convention. And that eliminates or restricts the production and use of our POPs, okay? These are our original dirty dozen. These are all persistent organic pollutants, and we've seen them before, and we might see them again. You don't need to know these, but know the names, be familiar with the names. I will never ask you to recite these out, okay? Aldrin, chlordane, DDT, Deldrin, Endrin, Hepachlor. All of these, pesticides, insecticides, fumigants, hexachlorobenzene, Mirex, toxaphene, polychlorinated biphenyls, polychlorinated dibenzyl, P-dioxins, and then polychlorinated dibenzofluorans, okay? These are almost all, you have the first three, which are insecticides and pesticides, and then the other ones are unintentional pollutants or used in an electrical and industrial equipment. Okay, so just be able to recognize these.